The reason why we put this session early in the training is that we know from experience that listening is the most important skill for a person who's a social activist. And so often it's a skill that is underdeveloped and not well understood. And we feel that this session is fundamental in what it means to be able to find common ground, as Senator Udall spoke about yesterday. And we'll hear more about this from John Paul Lederach, how, so to speak, we can reach across the divide or the aisle or differences. And also how we can actualize a quality of empathy that allows us through listening to actually do perspective taking. That is to see through the eyes of another, to be able to open ourselves to views that are very radically different from our own. And this very much comes out of the work by Glassman Roshi. And the emphasis in the Peacemaker Order on the three tenets, and the tenet of not knowing and bearing witness as the foundation for compassionate action. And of course, Bernie was famous for saying, "It's just my opinion, man." So that's the other piece that we want to hold, that all of us probably have very strong opinions. And many of us express them frequently, including myself. And we're in a political climate where we want our voices heard. And can we have our voices heard from the point of view of deep listening? So Tova, I welcome you. I'm really happy to be doing this particular training with you. And please.
So thank you very much, Roshi and Kozan, for the introduction, and Roshi for putting listening in the context of this socially engaged Buddhist training. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. And I know that there will be some people listening to this offering later. And we're all in different time zones, so I have been getting used to saying good afternoon, which it is for me in San Francisco, good evening, and for some of you it may be good morning or good night. So I wanted to share a little bit more about myself and my path in that I think it will give you some of the context from which I'm going to be talking about listening, and also give you an overview of what we'll be doing in this time together. As Roshi mentioned, listening is a skill, and in order to learn a skill, we have to practice it. So it's a little harder on Zoom to do so, but we will have an opportunity to practice listening in this gathering together today. And I'm going to suggest a couple of exercises that you can do in the future with your colleagues, friends, or other members of this training. So just to tell you, I thought I would mention 3 highlights in my own path to socially engaged Buddhism and to listening. And later in my presentation, I'll give a more personal anecdote that has to do with listening. But just a few parts of my background. I grew up in New York City. I was the oldest of 3 children in a secular Jewish family. And my parents were, I would say, very engaged in learning, but they were also product of the Depression, or they graduated from high school during the Depression, and so went to work, were unable to attend college. And I think that had something to do with their hesitancy about adopting new ideas or being open to new ideas. But I was fortunate to go to Antioch College, and then I transferred to UC Berkeley. But in the summer of my last year, just before my senior year at UC Berkeley, I participated in a voter registration project in North Carolina that was organized by the American Friends Service Committee, and was the summer of 1963. And we were a group of Black and white college students staying in the basement of a Black church in Greensboro. And it was there that I really learned about the history of the South. And at that time, students were demonstrating at the Woolworth's counter. Black students were not allowed to sit at the counter at Woolworth's, and people could be arrested for attempting to register to vote. And that summer, at the end of our 3 weeks of voter registration, we got on a bus and had a police escort out of Greensboro to attend the March on Washington. And that experience has remained with me, and I think has, really influenced a lifelong commitment to working on racial justice issues. And then I'm going to fast forward to a training I did in 1982 with Joanna Macy, who was our speaker last week. And Joanna has been one of my teachers and mentors ever since that time. It was a weekend workshop. At that time, her work was called Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age. And it's now the work that reconnects, as you know. And in that workshop, I reawakened my desire to get involved in social activism. I had put it on hold. I'd gone to social work school, and even though I was involved in the women's movement and in LGBT liberation, I really wasn't doing anything in the broader realm of peace work or social justice work until I took that workshop with Joanna. And afterwards, I joined a civil disobedience group. It was a group of women. And we went to there was a women's peace encampment in Seneca, New York, right near an army base where they were stockpiling nuclear weapons and sending them to England and Germany. And a group of us, I was in a civil disobedience affinity group. We'd had training, and quite a large number of us climbed over the fence and got arrested. And that experience also was kind of pivotal for me to actually put my body on the line, so to speak, where about something I thought was really harmful and wrong. And when I came back, I was living in Boston at the time. But what happened when I came back was I was really angry at all of the friends who had not gone and demonstrated. And I had this self-righteousness, I think, about what I had done, and wasn't very helpful. You know, and so I learned from that there wasn't, you know, that people have different priorities and act in different ways to express their concerns. But I think it was really my Buddhist practice that helped me to come to activist work from a place of love rather than a place of anger or self-righteousness. And when I moved to the Bay Area in 1990, I became involved with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. I know Roshi was one of the early founders of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. I worked, well, first I joined the board of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. The office was in Berkeley, and I became a staff member of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship several years later. And I worked closely with Alan Senaki, who I will be participating in this program again. He was also been one of my teachers and mentors. And the Buddhist Peace Fellowship had a program. It was designed by someone named Diana Winston, who's a Vipassana teacher now. She was, she called it BASE, Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement. And it had some similarities to this socially engaged Buddhist training that we're all involved in at Upaya. It was a 6-month program, and people got together regularly to, and it was also much smaller. The groups were usually 20 to 25 people and would meet to sit together, study engaged Buddhism, and volunteer or work in a socially engaged setting. And my work with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship really helped me deepen my practice of both social activism and Buddhism, and feel that they were so closely connected. So I'm going to turn now to the connections between listening and social justice work. And I think, again, Roshi touched on those, that in order to be effective, I think, in any kind of social justice work, we have to develop our capacity to listen. And I want to offer a few words of Rhonda McGee, who will also be teaching in this program. Rhonda McGee, if you don't know who she is, she's, among other things, a law professor at the University of San Francisco, a mindfulness teacher. She received Jukai lay ordination from Roshi Joan last year. And she's a wonderful teacher and writer. She leads workshops on mindfulness and race, and wrote a book called The Inner Work of Racial Justice, which I'll be drawing on as we go along. And she said, we need help developing the capacity to be able to listen to the very different stories of others with compassion, to have conversations across lines of real and perceived difference that help and heal rather than hamper and hurt. So in order to have conversations that help and heal rather than hamper and hurt, I've found it's helpful to work with some communication agreements. And I'd like to share with you the communication agreements that we've been using at San Francisco Zen Center in classes and groups. And also to acknowledge that we came to them through the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California, which is really the most diverse Dharma center that I've encountered in terms of race and class and ability and sexual orientation. And it's a storefront right now. Of course, they're doing everything online, just as all of our Dharma centers are. But they're a storefront close to public transportation, very accessible. And I think they are doing some pioneering work in making the Dharma widely accessible. So these communication agreements, I'm going to ask if we could see them on the screen. Thank you, Kigaku. I will read them aloud and highlight a few that I think are particularly relevant to the work we're doing, and then just see if you have any questions. So the first one, try it on. Be willing to try on new ideas or ways of doing things that might not be what you prefer or are familiar with. And that doesn't mean that you have to wear them. You just try them on and see. This is part of having an open mind and being willing to really deeply listen to ideas we may not agree with. Practice self-focus, attend to and speak about your own experiences and responses. Do not speak for a whole group or express assumptions about the experience of others. So I've been really trying to learn to say I and not we. Often there's a temptation to say we do this or we think that, and it's, you know, sometimes it's possible if you qualify it, and I might say, well, we Zen students, perhaps, but we does not include everybody. So I think saying I is really the better pronoun. Understand the difference between intent and impact. Try to understand and acknowledge impact. Denying the impact of something said by focusing on intent is often more destructive than the initial interaction. And I think this is one of the really important communication agreements for those of us who are engaged in social justice work, because we may say or do things that have a different impact than what we intended. And if someone lets us know that what we said or did hurt them, I come to see it as a gift and learn to take it in and apologize. And rather than saying, oh, I didn't mean it, which negates the other person's experience. So practice both and. When speaking, substitute and for but. This practice honors multiple realities, and it is possible to have, for example, to be happy about someone's good luck or good fortune, or happy about something someone did at the same time that I may be grieving about something happening in my own life. That's refrain from blaming or shaming self and others. Practice giving skillful feedback. Often if I respond to someone in a blaming way, they will just shut down and not be able to hear what I'm trying to say if I do want to give some feedback. Move up, move back. Encourage full participation by all present. Take note of who is speaking and who is not. If you tend to speak often, consider moving back and vice versa. this one I also think is very important, particularly for those of us who might be white, racialized, or in a dominant group, to step back and if we are often the ones who raise our hands first or um, take a lot of airtime in a group, and be aware of those who may not find it so easy to speak up and make space so that everybody gets some time. Uh, Practice mindful listening. Try to avoid planning what you'll say as you listen to others. So we'll be practicing mindful listening today. Be willing to be surprised, to learn something new. Listen with your whole self. And this ties in with not knowing and um, also the concept of beginner's mind, which I'll say a little bit more about later. And confidentiality. Take home learnings, but don't identify anyone other than yourself now or later. If you want to follow up with anyone regarding something they said in a class or in a small group, ask first and respect their wishes. And then I would also say that if you're in a small group and you are reporting back, you might share what a common thread, but and or what you shared in the group, rather than sharing what someone else shared in the group. And then the last one is the right to pass. You can say, I pass, if you don't wish to speak. So I'm wondering if you have any comments or questions about these communication agreements. So we are a very large group, so I'm going to suggest that you put them in the chat. If you do have some comments or questions, and take a moment to look at the chat. Is the chat accessible?
Yeah, I just went
Yes.
ahead and enabled it for everyone so they can, if people would just chat publicly, I mean, to everyone so that everyone can see questions.
And also, it would be wonderful, Sensei, if you would share with people how you actually communicate these agreements in a group process.
Okay, thank you. So in a group process, I would go over the agreements as I have in this group and ask for questions, and also ask if anyone would like to add anything that might be left out. And then just see if there's anyone in the group who, by show of hands, who cannot agree, because, and then assume that everybody has agreed to abide by these communication agreements. And then encourage people to remind one another about these agreements, or as a facilitator to comment. For example, if I notice that only if the same few people are raising their hands, I might say, I'd like to hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet before calling on someone for a second time. That's one way as a facilitator I would work with the agreement of move forward, move back. And I think, in working with these agreements, it's important to have the intention, if you notice somebody is not following the agreement, to point it out in a way that calls the person in rather than calling them out, to be kind, and to note, just comment on what you noticed. And I think having these agreements in place contributes to a more mindful form of expression. And I haven't had to I don't know if that's what you meant, Roshi, by that question.
Yeah, that's
We're-
very helpful. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
so-
you.
So
Yeah.
I would suggest that these will be available, that for the smaller groups that are going to be meeting, they may want to adopt these communication agreements. They really help facilitate conversations.
And Tova, Dorothy asked a question about intent and impact. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes. Someone put a comment in the chat here about that too. Is it Victoria? So it's possible, I'll read her comment. I would agree with apologizing if you have offended anyone, even unintentionally. But your intention and mindfulness for probable consequences of your actions or speech is all you can reasonably be accountable for. Someone taking a remark personally, regardless of intent and any common sense, cannot be accounted for. Well, I don't agree with that, actually. I think my intention may be positive, but if my comment hurts someone, I may have made a comment that was insensitive around somebody's. I'm trying to think. I could give an example. It's going to take a few minutes, but I think maybe this is worthwhile. It involves a short story. So some years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I think so, there was a shooting on the corner of Page and Laguna, where San Francisco Zen Center is located. And it was around 9 at night, and 4 young men were shot in a parked car, and they all died. They lived in the neighborhood. They were African American, and those of us at San Francisco Zen Center, some of us heard the shots, and the police came. The whole street became a crime scene, and there was yellow tape everywhere. But the next day, many friends and family members of the 4 young men who had died came to the street corner and set up a shrine at the street corner. And we began talking with some of them. And we were invited to a vigil at an African-American community center up the street, and joined a vigil which became a march from that center back to San Francisco Zen Center to the corner. And I was walking next to another Zen student who was African American, and I asked her if she had experienced that kind of violence in her youth. If this had been something that she had experienced, and she didn't answer at the time, but later she came and talked to me about it and said she was very hurt because I had assumed that she grew up in a place where, because she was African American, that there was violence, and that that had not been her experience. And she told me more about her family and origin, and I was very grateful that she, called me out in a sense, because I had stereotyped her. And so I feel it was appropriate to apologize. It wasn't my intention, but it was, my assumption. and it was wrong. And so I think that may help to illustrate how intention and impact can be very different, and why it's important to really listen when somebody says, oh, that it could be a joke, it could be, you know, we probably all heard the term microaggressions. Something we say is insensitive or comes from lack of awareness of um, I, the lack of awareness or even ignorance of history. Um, we may say or do things that are harmful to others. So I hope that answers the question. Just looking to see if there are any others.
Tova, thank you. I'm going to ask Kozan, if you
Yeah.
would scan the questions, because I know Tova is trying to respond.
Yeah, I was just actually going to jump in with that and say right up at the top, Tova, there was a question from Eileen Berry asking if you could maybe give an example of the and but difference and how you use and instead of but to have this kind of fruitful dialogue. And before you jump in, Tova, I just want to ask people to ask questions in the comment thread or the chat thread. Some of us are kind of starting other conversations or comments that are ancillary to this. I think we're going to dig into a lot of that later in this conversation, but just so we're not scanning through so many different things, if there's a question on this topic, to keep it there for now.
Okay. So, and rather than but is an example might be I hear that you are upset about something, and really I'm struggling to find an example for you, and I'm surprised that it's so hard for me to come up with one, because I have been practicing with this for some time, and I really think it's important. That might be an example. I don't know if that helps, but let's see.
I just want to make sure people picked up on that you were saying, and you've done this for a long time,
Yeah.
not, you know, I'm struggling with this, but I've done this for so long, you know, the way that but undercuts us or the person we're talking to. We were talking about politics last night with Senator Udall, and he said things I've talked to people since that people disagreed with. And you can disagree in politics, like let's say democracy reform being so important. We talked about it a lot last night. And you could say, yes, democracy is important, but isn't the environment so much more important? Or yeah, democracy.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And the environment's such a pressing issue. What about that too? And the difference in tone in a conversation becomes really vast between the two, right?
Right. Thank you, Kozan. That's a great example. Yeah, it's like, yes, one issue is important and the other is also important. So it doesn't cancel the other one out.
Mhm.
Sometimes in feedback, this comes up, like, I thought you did a really good job uh, in that talk, but. The but, it kind of cancels out. You really did a good job. I thought you did a good job, and this could have been a little more clear. You could have been more clear about your examples. So, it's both.
Yeah.
They exist, they both exist.
You know, there's so
Yeah.
many questions in the thread here. I don't know if you want to go through a lot more or what the right cadence is. There's many I could kind of pull out. It sounds like most people understand the thrust of these guidelines you've shared. There's some interesting kind of ancillary ones. One that's sticking out to me is the progressive stack, this notion of calling on people or putting a stack of who talks next based on those more likely to be underrepresented or those historically underrepresented.
Yes,
Do you use that?
I have used that. Yeah. I first actually encountered that in a Buddhist Peace Fellowship conference where there was a panel on race, and the moderator took questions first from people of color and then from white.
Mhm.
So that would be an example of a progressive stack. I actually do want to move on because time is swiftly passing, and I think, yeah. So unless there's one more pressing question.
I think it's good to move on. Maybe there'll be time at the end for what's still present for people.
Okay. So I wanted to say a few things about listening deeply, and then I'm going to share an exercise that we will be doing in small groups, and come back and talk a little about questioning, which I think is an important corollary with listening. So you've probably heard phrases like active listening, mindful listening, which is one that Rhonda McGee uses, and deep listening. And one of the things I've become aware of in listening is that it's very important to listen to oneself as well as to listen to the other, and to be able to tune in to my body as I'm listening. I wanted to share a Zen story that involves listening. That is a story about Kuan Yin, who is the embodiment of compassion. Kuan Yin initially was a bodhisattva, and a bodhisattva is an awakening being, and often bodhisattvas are thought of as archetypes. And Kuan Yin originally was in India, given the name Avalokiteshvara, which is one who hears the cries of the world. It can also be translated as regarder of the cries of the world. And Kuan Yin is often depicted if you see statues or paintings of Kuan Yin, sometimes with multiple hands. Sometimes I have seen statues. There's an amazing temple in Kyoto that's a Kuan Yin temple that has 1,000 statues of Kuan Yin, and each one has multiple hands. And sometimes there's an eye in each hand. These hands are emblematic of the many different ways in which Kuan Yin responds to the cries of the world. So there's a Zen story, a teaching story called The Hands and Eyes of the Bodhisattva of Great Compassion. And it's about two Dharma friends, or Dharma, in this case, Dharma brothers, Yunyan and Dawu. And Dawu is referred to as maybe the more experienced Dharma friend. Has been practicing, perhaps been practicing longer. So Yunyan asks Dawu, what does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use so many hands and eyes for? And older brother says, it's like someone reaching back, groping for a pillar, groping for a pillow in the middle of the night. So that sense of compassion, that being very near, groping for a pillow in the night, something that's comforting. And Yunyan says, I understand. And Dawu asks, how do you understand it? And Yunyan says, all over the body are hands and eyes. So the hands and eyes of compassion are all over the body. And Dawu says, you've said quite a bit, but you've only said 80%. And then Yunyan says, what do you say, elder brother? And Dawu says, throughout the body are hands and eyes. So what this connotes for me is that we can listen with our whole body. Listening is not just through the ears or skin deep, but it's our whole body responding to the person we're listening to. And that that kind of listening, it's not, but there's another in the communication agreement that we just looked at about listening. It says, listen fully without thinking about what you're going to say next. And I think that's really important. And we can still listen to our bodies in terms of what's coming up for us. Are we open to what the other person is saying? Does something trigger something in us? It could be a memory that makes it harder to listen, or is it triggering perhaps anger as I'm listening? And to be aware of our physical response to what we're hearing. And we may not I would say if I notice when I'm listening to someone that anger is arising, I find it helpful to be really aware of that, because I may need to ground myself, to take a breath, to feel my feet on the floor before I respond, because I don't want to respond from anger. So
So Tova, could I mention something right now?
Yes, Roshi, of
So
course.
this is such an important point that Tova is making about tuning to your own experience, particularly through the body. That, as Tova is suggesting, often the mind, the sort of cognitive aspect of our experience, is a little bit late. The body is actually responding at a preconscious level. And for us to be able to actually use the body not only for grounding, but as a tuning fork, so that we can see our reactivities and our biases, or access them, our reactivities and biases more clearly before we land a punch, so to speak. And then this two other things I want to mention. Moving the pillow at night is also an image of compassion is undivided, if you will. It's completely natural. It's unself-conscious. We don't put on a big bodhisattva button, so to speak, or proclaim all the great things we're doing. But it's more like this gesture that is so natural. And also it's happening in the darkness, you know, in the sort of field of the absolute. And so the naturalness, when somebody asked about an example, it's at that level, it's an unmediated response. It's not self-conscious, it's not self-praising. It's not about getting something or being anything. It's more of an undivided experience that can be mitigated when anger or need for praise is present.
Yeah, thank you. It also points to a kind of humility in listening, which I think relates to not knowing, not really knowing what the other person's experience is, and being curious, wanting to be open to it. And that requires letting go for a while of my own, perhaps my own strongly held beliefs. So I'm going to lead us into an exercise now. And it will start with a short guided meditation, and it will invite you to explore 2 questions, and then we will divide in breakout groups, and you'll have a chance to speak and to be listened to, and then to listen. So I invite you to start by finding a comfortable position to sit in, or if you're lying down, it can be lying down, and to take a moment to connect with your breath, just to maybe take 2 breaths that are deeper than usual. Notice the sensation of the breath as it enters your nostrils and leaves. And you may want to either close your eyes or keep your eyes open, but with a very soft gaze. And notice if you're sitting on a chair, the sensation of your feet touching the floor. If you're sitting on a cushion, feel the points of contact with the cushion. And just take a moment to notice any places in your body that may be tense, places that are relaxed. And now I invite you to think about a time when you did not feel listened to or heard. A time when you were expressing something that you felt was important. And you did not feel heard. How does that feel now in your body as you remember that time? Do you notice any changes in your breathing? What is arising for you? And now I invite you to think of a time when you did feel listened to, when you felt seen, heard, valued, respected. And notice how this feels in your body. In your breath. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to return to the room. Open your eyes. And remember those two experiences. So going to ask Kigaku to form these breakout groups with 3 people in each group. And I'll ask the person whose birthday is closest to January 1st to go first. And you'll have 3 minutes to talk about the time when you did not feel listened to and the time when you did feel listened to. And the other 2 people in the group, give that person your undivided attention and try to listen with your body. And then the second person will have a chance to share, and then the third. And at the end, you'll have 3 more minutes to debrief with each other, talk about how that felt to be listened to by the others in the group. So in a way, you'll be having an experience of being listened to as you talk about the experiences of not being listened to and being listened to in your own life. Okay.
So,
So
Sensei Tova,
yeah,
with creating these rooms, I can either do 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 participants, and then some people won't show up. So is it okay to have just 2 if it's just 2?
yes, if it's just
Okay.
2, it's fine. I think 4
Okay.
is many, so let's do 2 to 3. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you ready to go?
So I'm creating these rooms, and 12 minutes automatically close after 12 minutes.
Yes.
Great. And we're gonna go ahead and open the rooms, and please go ahead and join the room that's assigned to you. You'll have to join it yourself. It's not automatic, so that the teachers aren't going to join them. Here we go, opening rooms. Roshi, Tova, and Kozan don't join, and everybody else should be joining the room now. So
Quite a few people.
Brandy, yeah, I see a few people. Let's see, Vanessa, you're unassigned, so I'm gonna go ahead and assign you to a room. Chuck and Nat, are you guys gonna go to a room? And Mac,
You sent me to a group and I thought I would rather not be in a group.
yeah, that's what I was saying. Don't join a group. If
Okay,
you
but it was good
says
because
join.
I gave there were two people. Yeah.
So Mac, I see you're on camera. Are you not able to join the group that you're assigned to? You can unmute yourself if you want.
I can join now, yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Sorry.
No problem.
And we have,
And then
yeah,
Chuck and Annette, are you gonna join a group?
and Larissa and John, Dominica.
Oh, Quinn's on there. So what I usually do is at this point, I would put the people who aren't joining into a waiting room and open the waiting room for anybody that comes in. Should I do that now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So Mac, are you not able to join the group you're assigned to? There should be a button.
I'm sorry. I just got an important message. I'm going to have to stay out of it right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. I'll put you in the, no problem. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Don't worry. You've got 10 minutes. Put everybody else in the waiting room. Frank can stay though. Hey, Frank.
I know, I'm not going in a group.
Yeah.
Hi, Frank.
Oh, Enkyo's on. Hi, Enkyo. You can stay here too.
it's great.
see.
I love those guidelines, Tova. That's wonderful.
I think they're really helpful, Roshi. Yeah.
Tova, I'm enjoying this so much.
Oh, thank you. How
Yes.
good to see you.
I'm hiding back here behind my avatar, but I'm enjoying this very much. And it's good to see Frank, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you well, Enkyo?
Yes, I'm snowed in, but I'm well.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of snow in New York.
Mhm.
And I try to follow the weather in New York because I have ones in New York. And yeah, this winter has been really harsh, I think.
I like what you're doing with the groups. I like what you're doing, Tova. It's great.
Oh, thank you.
It can be very sensitive to work in this way. I think it's great.
Yeah. I think it's important to do small group work especially with listening. And it's so hard to teach listening, it seems to me, over Zoom, but
Yeah, and with such a large cohort, Joan has managed to bring together this
yeah.
wonderful people from all over who, have an urge to learn. And
Mhm.
they're not in an intimate little room like we're used to. But I think you're doing a great job. And doing the breakout groups, of course, really works beautifully to balance that with the presentational part. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks. I took longer than I planned to. But I think that going slowly is okay. for this subject matter.
Yeah, just the right rhythm. That's just right.
Tova, how do you want to end the hour and a half? Were you thinking of people asking questions or
Yeah, I
sharing
was.
kind of what they experienced?
Yes, so I was thinking of having people come back and share how it felt to be listened to and to raise their hand to comment or respond, or to raise their hand or to comment in the chat. But it's really hard for me to follow the chat and pay attention to.
Yeah, the chat can be dangerous with this many people. You know, if
Yeah.
just 5% of people want to comment and they end up commenting, it's hard to find where the questions are in the noise.
So maybe let's not use the chat. So can we do the raised hands?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's have people raise their hands. Do you want me to call on them and unmute them and all that?
That, if you can do that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, of course.
We can also, if we're going to do that, we might just make it possible for people to unmute themselves, can take out a step, if that's okay with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'll call on them and ask them to unmute themselves just so we don't get cacophony.
Okay, so leave it so that they can't unmute themselves unless
No,
you press the button, ask to unmute.
No, they can unmute if we want to try that. I don't think did we do that last night?
No, we called
No.
on people. And
We-
I think it's good actually for them to raise their hands and for us to call on them.
Oh yeah, yeah. No. I'm saying they raise their hands, we call on them, but then they're able to unmute themselves once we call on them. And if people are unmuting themselves without us calling on them, then we have to re-enable that. It's just another step, and it's confusing sometimes when people are like,
everybody
wait, unmute.
in a group like you is seeing this.
So for example, I'm going to mute Nanette now because she's talking. And now she can't unmute herself unless I say ask to unmute, unless I change the option, which is to allow them to unmute themselves. Anyway, up to you, Kozan, because you'll be doing the calling.
I think both have their uses. Have you found one works better? You've done a lot of this. I think some people don't know how to unmute themselves. I mean, by now I think everyone does, or you get it.
I have it enabled to allow host to unmute you is an option when people log in. So sometimes it might just say unmute, and then you can just unmute them. But sometimes it says ask to unmute, and then they have to unmute themselves. Oh, Frank wants to unmute.
Oh, Frank wants to unmute. Yeah, let's just make it. Oh, hi.
All right, I'm just gonna say allow participants to unmute. So now people can unmute themselves. Frank?
Oh,
I
but they
just
should come back in.
wanted to say hello to Tova and thank you.
Hello, Frank.
Say thank you. Yeah.
Lovely to see you.
Hi, Frank.
Hello, thank you.
You look well.
Oh, you're very kind.
I have heard stories, but you do look well.
Oh,
Delight to the eye.
don't believe the surface appearance.
May I ask where you are geographically, Frank?
I'm in Sausalito
Oh,
on our houseboat.
On a boat?
On our houseboat, yeah.
Great.
So Kozan, when everybody comes back in, you might say to the 6 or more people who are in the waiting room, what we just did, because some people might have left when we went into small groups.
Okay, I don't want to step on your toes, Tova. So if you want to welcome people back.
I can welcome people back and give them the suggestion, but if you would call on people, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll just let them know you'll be doing that. And then I was planning to talk a little about questioning. So we'll see if there are if a lot of people want to contribute to the conversation, I would rather go with that. And I'll just stop at like 25 past and make some closing comments. I realize also I forgot to let people know who are watching this at another time that they could do some writing about these questions.
Oh yeah. hard to do that after because they won't know to fast
Yeah, they
forward.
won't. No, they won't.
Yeah, actually, this part of the everything that's happening right now is on the recording, so I'm gonna have to remove that. So I'm gonna need to stop the recording and restart it. Thanks for reminding me. But you could say that at the beginning of the next piece, because that's what they'll see. Whoever's watching it later will see like the second part of this, and you can
I
say,
see.
if you're starting this, know that we just had a 15-minute or a 12-minute break during which blah blah blah. So you could say that then.
Okay. And should I say the questions as well? No, they would have heard the questions because I gave the questions.
Yeah, they'll have heard the questions. When I edit the video, I'll stop it after you say the questions.
Okay. So I'll just say, if you're watching this later, we just had breakout groups and I invite you to do some writing about those questions.
Great.
Great.
Can you touch up my appearance, Noah, when you do the editing, please?
Actually, you can touch up your appearance pretty well using the backgrounds and filters. Okay, so people are going to close
Yeah,
out.
close now. Okay, did they get
So
any?
you can have a